everyone, and welcome back to my channel Cakes by MK. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make this super gorgeous flour jelly cake. If you're new to my channel, please click the subscribe button below and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so that you're updated whenever I upload a new video. Apart from that, stay tuned and I hope you guys enjoy this video. So the first step to making this gorgeous flour jelly cake is to start off with a cake that has a full coat of buttercream on it. So what I've got here is I've got a 5-inch cake which is completely coated in vanilla Swiss meringue buttercream. And you want to make sure that the cake that you've got is a few inches smaller than the mold that we're going to use to put our jelly in a little bit later. Today I've got a 5-inch cake here and my cake ring that I'm going to be using later on is an 8-inch cake ring. So I've got a 3-inch difference there. Now once your crumb coated cake is all ready to go, the next step is to start adding the flower designs onto the outside of the cake. Now there are so many different ways that you can add these flowers to your cake. So you can use edible flowers, you can use edible dried flowers, you can use buttercream flowers which are pre-piped. But today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using a Russian piping tip to add my flowers to my cake. Now I do have a more in-depth tutorial on Russian piping tips if you want to learn more about them, and I'll post a link to that below. But today I'm just going to be using 2 piping tips. So I've got a rose Russian piping tip here, and then I've also got a leaf piping tip here. So that's going to help me get some beautiful greenery around my flowers. Now to pipe my flowers and my leaves today, I've got some vanilla Swiss meringue buttercream which I have colored. So for my roses I'm going to be using the pink and the white buttercream, and then for my leaves I'm going to be using the green buttercream. Now I'm going to start off by showing you guys how I use the purple and the white to create a beautiful two-toned rose using my Russian piping tip. So first of all, I'm just getting my piping bag and I'm going to put my piping tip in it. I'm just cutting the edge so my piping tip comes through. Now my buttercream has been sitting out for a little while, so I'm just giving it a little mix to get rid of some of those air bubbles which have kind of formed. Okay, so now that my buttercream is nice and smooth, I'm going to start putting it into my piping bag. So I'm going to start off by getting my small offset spatula, and I'm going to grab the purple buttercream and kind of smudge it around the edges of my piping bag. Now once you've got the purple buttercream nicely coated around the edges of the piping bag, the next thing that you want to do is you want to grab your color for the middle, which is in my case white buttercream, and I'm going to just put that all in the middle of my piping bag. Then you just want to close it up and then squeeze all of that white buttercream to the bottom. And then you can test out one of your roses to make sure it's coming out the way that you want it to look. Now at the moment, mine are all purple because the white hasn't quite come through yet, but it's piping really well, so I'm really happy with the consistency. Now I'm just going to keep piping until that white starts to come through, and then I'm going to start piping it onto my cake. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pipe a rim of roses around the top edge of my cake. So that's my first rose there, and I'm just going to keep piping around the cake. Okay, so now that I've got the flowers all around the top rim, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add more flowers on the top, and I'm going to add 1 flower in between each of the bottom flowers. Okay, so I've added the flowers to the top of my cake, and now the last thing that I'm going to do with the flowers is I'm going to add a flower every now and then in between 2 of the bottom flowers, so it kind of creates this kind of diamond pattern going down the bottom of the cake. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to fill some of the green buttercream in a piping bag with my leaf nozzle on it, and I'm going to pipe some leaves around all of these flowers. Now I'm just going to start off by placing a leaf at the tip of every one of the flowers which are right on the bottom. Now once I've got all the leaves on the bottom, I'm going to start adding leaves all around the edges of all the flowers. So I finished adding the piping on my cake, and now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop this into the fridge for about 10 to 15 minutes, just to allow the buttercream to slightly firm up before we come back and start assembling our mold around our cake for our jelly. So to set up my mold today for my jelly, I'm going to start off by getting a cake ring. You can even use a springform pan for this, and I'm going to place it around the cake. Just being really careful not to touch the edges. And then once you've got it right in the middle, the next thing that you want to do is you just want to grab a little piece of sellotape and just secure the cake ring to the cake board. Now, I'm just going to do this by placing one piece of sellotape on either side of the cake ring. Now once the cake ring is nicely in place, the next thing that you want to do is you want to add something to the bottom of your cake ring to stop the jelly from coming out and kind of going everywhere. Now this part is really important. Now if you watched my island jelly cake video, which is the first time I did one of these jelly cakes, I put sellotape all around the bottom of the cake ring. Now you can do that, you just want to make sure that it's really tightly pushed up against the edge of the cake ring and that there's kind of no holes, otherwise your jelly will come out. But another easy way that I've come across, and I've watched a few people do this, is to simply just pipe a rim of buttercream around the bottom of your cake ring. You can even use ganache for this, and then simply let it firm up in the fridge, and that acts as a really good barrier to prevent any jelly from coming out. So I'm simply going to be using my leftover buttercream, which is why it's all funny colors, and I'm just going to use a large round tip nozzle to pipe a rim of buttercream around the bottom of this cake ring. Now once you've piped that rim of buttercream around your cake ring, the next thing that you want to do is you want to grab a piece of acetate sheet, and what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it around the inside of the cake ring, but you want to make sure that you are gentle with this because you don't want your acetate sheet to kind of ruin your flowers that you've just piped on. And then just grab a piece of sellotape and we're going to quickly secure the two pieces of acetate together so that it doesn't fold in on our cake. And I'm also placing some sellotape on the inside of the acetate sheet as well. Now once you've secured the acetate sheet together and it's not kind of moving around and it's nicely in place, then your mold is now set up and now we're ready to go ahead and make our jelly. Now while we're making our jelly, I'm going to pop this into the fridge to allow the buttercream around the bottom rim there to become nice and firm so that it acts as a really good barrier when we come to pouring our jelly into our mold. Now to make the jelly for our cake today, I'm going to start off by blooming some gelatin. Now what I've got here is I've got some powdered gelatin and some plain water, and what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to put my water into my gelatin, give that a little mix, and then set it aside for about 5 minutes to allow it to bloom up. And I will have the full quantities to all the ingredients in the description box below. Now while that is blooming away, I'm going to make the sugar mixture for our jelly. So what I've got here is I've got a pot with some water in it, and to that water I'm going to add some sugar, and I'm simply going to heat that up until my sugar is completely dissolved. Now once your water has heated up and your sugar is completely dissolved, so your mixture is really nice and clear, then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pour my liquid into another bowl. So in this case I'm using this pouring jug, which is going to make it easier when I want to pour it into my mold later. And then I'm simply going to add my gelatin to that hot water and then just mix it together until the gelatin is completely dissolved and incorporated into my sugar water. My little jug is super full, so I'm just being really gentle, but you can put this into something a little bit bigger so it's a bit easier to mix around. Now once the mixture is completely mixed together, you should be left with a kind of yellowy clear liquid like this. And now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to color it with the tiniest bit of pink. So I've added a little bit of pink gel food color to my jelly mixture, and it's kind of like a peach color now. And now you want to let this cool now before we come to pouring it into our mold. So my jelly's been cooling now for just over an hour and it's lukewarm to the touch, so you do want to make sure that your jelly isn't hot and you want to give it this time to cool down, otherwise it's just going to melt your buttercream if it's too hot. And I also made an extra batch just because I noticed that the gap between my cake and my acetate sheet is quite large, probably a bit larger than I wanted. I thought that my flowers were going to come out a little bit more, but that's okay. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour a little bit of the jelly inside my mold just to make sure that there's no jelly kind of coming out the sides, and then I'm just going to pop it into the fridge just for about 2 to 3 minutes to allow it to firm up slightly so that the bottom part is nice and secure, so that when I go ahead and pour the rest of my jelly, it's not just gonna kind of all come out. So yeah, I'm just going to pour a little bit of the jelly first and then see how I go. Okay, so I don't have any jelly coming out the sides, which is a really good sign. It means that everything's nice and secure. And now I'm just going to pop this into the fridge for 2 to 3 minutes, and then I'm going to slowly pour in the rest of my jelly. So my cake is out of the fridge now. The bottom layer of jelly is nice and set, so I'm going to go ahead and very slowly pour in the rest of my jelly, and I'm going to take little breaks in between. Now this is just to make sure that my jelly isn't too hot. So my jelly is pretty, almost completely cool now, but because this is buttercream, you really want to make sure that, you're keeping a close eye on it, because if you do notice that any of your buttercream is starting to melt, that means your jelly is too hot, so you need to pop your cake back into the fridge and then let it cool for a bit and then come back and pour the rest of your jelly. So just keep a close eye on your cake. So I've put all of the jelly in my mold now, and the only thing left now is I've got some bubbles at the top, which I don't want, so I'm just going to get a spoon and just slowly scoop out those bubbles at the top. Okay, so I've taken all the bubbles off the top now, and now I'm simply going to pop this into the fridge and let it sit now for at least a couple of hours, ideally overnight, and then we're going to come back and take off the mold and see what it looks like. So my cake's been chilling for about 4 hours now and my jelly is nice and set. So I'm going to go ahead and start removing my mold. So what I'm going to do first is I've just got a butter knife here, and I'm going to slowly scrape off that buttercream around the edge of my cake ring. And then I'm slowly going to slide my cake ring up and then remove my acetate sheet. Now sometimes the cake ring can be a little bit hard to slide up, and if that is the case, then you can simply use a hairdryer to just heat up the outside slightly and then it should come right up. So yeah, I'm just going to take off the mold and then we're going to see what this cake looks like. Now I'm just finishing off by cleaning the bottom of my cake board to get rid of any of that leftover icing. And that is basically it. So my flour jelly cake is all done. There is a slight rim of kind of uneven jelly at the top of my cake, but I'm just going to leave mine just like that. You can try and even it out if you want, but set jelly can be a little bit hard to get really nice and straight, so I'm just going to leave mine like that. So that is it. My cake is all done. I hope you guys enjoyed this video on how to create this show-stopping flour jelly cake. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this, and thanks again for watching Cakes by MK.